You walked into the store for one thing. You walked out with seven. And the strange part is that at no point did you feel like anyone was pushing you. It felt like your own decisions, your own choices, your own free will guiding the cart. But there is a field of research that says something uncomfortable about that moment. It says your brain was being steered from the second you stepped through the door, and the people who designed that store knew exactly what they were doing. The question is not whether it happened to you. It happened. The question is how. In 1974, a researcher named Robert Cialdini began studying the mechanics of influence. He was not studying advertising, he was studying people. Specifically, he was studying the small, almost invisible signals that cause one person to say yes when they were planning to say no. His conclusions, published in his landmark work on persuasion and influence, revealed something that would change the way retailers, restaurants, and financial products were designed forever. The environment shapes the decision, not the logic of the decision, the environment. Think about the last time you walked into a grocery store. You probably did not enter through the electronics section. You almost certainly passed through produce first. Fresh vegetables, bright colors, cool mist, the smell of something natural and clean. That is not an accident. Grocery stores have known for decades that if you feel virtuous at the start of a shopping trip, you give yourself permission to be less virtuous later. Researchers call this moral licensing. You bought the salad, so you earned the chips. It is the same reason you see bakery smells pumped toward the entrance of stores that do not even sell bread. Your brain is not evaluating every item independently. It is running on a rolling emotional ledger. And the store knows exactly how to tip that ledger in their favor before you have picked up a single item. Now here is where it gets stranger. In 2008, a behavioral economist named Dan Ariely published research showing that people's spending decisions are almost never made in absolute terms. You do not evaluate whether something is worth its price. You evaluate whether it is worth its price compared to something else nearby. He called this principle relativity. And retailers have been engineering it into their floor plans for longer than the word behavioral economics has existed. This is why the expensive item is almost always placed directly next to the thing you actually came to buy. You came for a mid-range blender. Right next to it sits a blender that costs 3 times as much. Suddenly, your original choice looks like the sensible one, the bargain. You feel smart buying it. But what you do not realize is that your definition of reasonable was just quietly rewritten by an object you were never going to purchase. The expensive item was never meant to sell. It was placed there to make the mid-range item feel like a win. Ariely tested this in multiple contexts. In one study involving magazine subscriptions, he found that when a high-priced option was added to a list, it dramatically increased the number of people choosing the mid-tier option, not because the mid-tier got better, because the expensive anchor made the middle feel like a deal. Remove the anchor and the whole pattern collapses. Your brain does not price things, it compares things. And the comparison is always set by someone else. Now, meet a man named Phil. Phil is 34. He earns a decent salary. He considers himself careful with money. He drives a practical car. He packs lunch most days. But every few months, Phil notices something unsettling. His checking account is lower than he expects it to be, and he cannot fully explain the gap. He goes through his transactions trying to find the leak. There is no single large purchase, just a slow, consistent accumulation of medium ones. A jacket on sale, a kitchen gadget marked down 40%, 3 streaming subscriptions, each of which seemed like a good deal individually. Phil does not have a spending problem in the traditional sense. Phil has an anchoring problem. Every time Phil sees a price, his brain automatically compares it to the original price sitting above it in red. He is not spending based on what things cost. He is spending based on how much he thinks he is saving. And somewhere in the distance between those two numbers, his money quietly disappears. This is what behavioral finance researchers call the anchoring bias. And it does not just live in stores, it lives in your car dealership, where the salesperson starts with the fully loaded model before showing you the one you can actually afford. It lives in your mortgage conversation, where the maximum amount you qualify for quietly becomes your target. It lives in every negotiation you have ever entered, where someone else named the first number, and you spent the rest of the conversation measuring everything against that number. The anchor is almost always set before you realize the conversation has started. Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017 for his work on behavioral economics, spent decades studying the gap between how people think they make decisions and how they actually do. One of his most consistent findings was that people behave very differently depending on how a choice is framed, even when the underlying math is identical. A fee described as an avoidable discount feels better than one described as a required surcharge. A product described as 90% fat-free moves faster than the same product described as containing 10% fat. You are not buying the thing, you are buying the framing of the thing. And retailers, banks, and subscription companies have spent billions of dollars perfecting that framing down to the exact color of the font. Think about the last subscription you signed up for. There was almost certainly a 3-tier pricing structure, a basic option, a premium option, and a middle option that came loaded with features that made it look like an extraordinary deal by comparison. This is not coincidence. This is a design pattern so well documented and so consistently effective that it has a name, the compromise effect. People avoid extremes. They gravitate toward the middle. So you engineer the middle to be exactly where you want them to land. You never chose the middle option freely. You were guided there. Now here is where this connects directly to your financial life. Not just your spending, but your saving, your investing, your financial future. The same anchoring principle that makes you buy the medium blender also shapes how much you think you need to retire. It shapes how much risk you believe is normal in an investment. It shapes whether a salary offer feels generous or insulting. Every financial number you hold in your head as a reference point was put there by someone. A commercial, a conversation, a figure someone mentioned once. And that number is quietly governing decisions you think you are making freely. Warren Buffett has described the danger of this in a different way. He talks about the importance of thinking in first principles rather than comparisons, of asking not what a stock is worth relative to yesterday's price, but what the underlying business is actually worth. This sounds simple. It is extraordinarily difficult because your brain finds comparison effortless and first principles thinking exhausting. The brain wants a shortcut. Retailers and markets both know exactly where that shortcut leads. The good news is that awareness changes the math. Not completely, not immediately, but research consistently shows that people who name the anchoring effect when they encounter it make measurably better purchasing decisions. Ariely's own work demonstrated that simply pausing to ask the question changes the outcome. Before this purchase, what reference point am I using to evaluate this price? Where did that reference point come from? Is it actually relevant to what I need? That pause is worth more than any budgeting app, because the store is not your enemy. The store is doing exactly what a store is designed to do. The problem is that your brain was not designed to navigate an environment engineered specifically to exploit its shortcuts. You are walking through a space optimized by decades of consumer psychology research, and you are doing it with the same neural hardware your ancestors used to decide whether a berry was safe to eat. The solution is not to stop shopping. The solution is to shop with a different kind of attention. Notice the anchor before you accept it. Notice where the expensive item is positioned relative to what you came for. Notice when a price feels like a deal and ask yourself what you are comparing it to. Notice when the environment itself is shaping how you feel about your money, because once you see the architecture, it loses most of its power. You walked into the store for one thing today. Next time, you will walk in knowing that the store already has a plan for your cart. The question is whether your wallet follows their plan or yours.